Thanks for coming, everybody. So I'm Randy Kertz for the ISB. I'm always afraid I'm going to say IBS, but it won't be today. So we're here to talk about longevity of the bassist. And usually I do a talk and a demonstration. This time I asked some friends to come by, and we're going to talk about this subject, and I hope you find it worthwhile. So Jason Heath is also going to participate. He'll be doing this for Contra-Bass Conversations and also the podcast and also, I believe, Facebook Live?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We're
So
live.
we're all set. So without further ado, we have weighing in at 100. We have Mr. John Patitucci. You know him, you love him. Has a resume a mile long, as you know, can currently be seen with his group as well as with Mr. Wayne Shorter and Mr. Chick Corea very often, correct?
Here and there, yes.
Here and there, yes. Next we have Mr. Steve Bailey. You know him?
Yes.
And you love him?
Steve, wait till I get to talk about you.
Steve needs no introduction, but we're going to give him a small one. Has a resume a mile long as well, and has played with everybody, done a ton of studio work here and then, and also is now currently the chair of Berkeley Bass Department, Steve Bailey. And lastly, we have a professor and fellow from the Royal Academy of Music, the founder and the artistic and executive director of Chiniki, who we were fortunate enough to see some of their work last night. The most interesting person alive, Miss Nwanoku. So I'd like to start it out with a general question to each of our panelists, and then there were some questions from the internet, I believe, and then we'll open it to the room for questions, and we'll see where this takes us, okay? So first of all, John.
Yes, sir.
You move seamlessly in your performances between the contrabass and the electric bass. What do you see as keys to doing both equally well, and longevity-wise, what are you looking out for, and how are you doing it?
I think, I'm almost 60 now. I'll be 60 in December. When I was younger, I didn't really think that much about, I studied, with my classical teachers, and in jazz, I was largely self-taught. I had mentors and stuff, but physically on the instrument, I developed my own technique. But with the classical studies, that was helpful. But, when you're young and you take things for granted, sometimes you're strong and you're doing stuff and you don't even realize. And what I found when I got to a certain point, maybe in my 40s, late 30s, was I used to sometimes alternate between standing and sitting, and I still do sometimes. But for years, I sat wrong with the stool. I had one leg low, one leg high, and I'd be bowing. It felt great. And then except until my lower back said, not anymore. And so I think you have to pay attention to your body, and it's going to change and evolve what it's better to not develop bad habits at the beginning. For me, I kind of knew even when I was younger that I was wrong, but it was much more comfortable to have one leg up on the stool and one down on the floor, and I paid for it later. But then I changed. I stood, had my both feet planted, or when I sit low enough to where I can keep my feet planted, and I started paying attention to my body. The electric bass, you know very well, you helped me. I had gone to this a huge instrument with a semi-hollow, huge six-string bass that it sounds glorious, but it weighs a ton. And we had to develop a special strap, because the first tour I took it out on, I had read a conventional strap. I had to get a cortisone shot later on. It was terrible.
And this is the signature bass, Mike.
Yeah. And so I figured out some. I did it on myself. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell. But Randy is an amazing resource. I encourage you to get his book. He breaks things down. He makes things very understandable, and he's helped a lot of us, including all three of us, I believe.
Thank you for that. Awareness is key. That's what I say all the time. We can point out faults or in technique or things that can be improved, by changing things a little bit perhaps. But you said you were doing this for a long time, and then, hey, your back started hurting, and you figured out a way to change it. It's okay to change the rules. It's okay to be comfortable, despite what people tell you, right? It's okay, and try to figure out a better way, or change things up a little bit. And if you feel better, you're probably doing the right thing. Okay. We talked also yesterday about the fact that a lot of injuries come up now from people doing other activities. Computers and things, that's all changed too. Not only with, so everyday tasks in life, which extends to us in the worlds of people can make albums in their bedroom now on their computer in the spare bedroom, right? And instead of the computer, for a lot of cases, we're doing laptops, right? So when you got a laptop, not only are you craning, not even to talk about the phone, but when you have a laptop, you're leaning forward and your wrists kind of fall off of the edge of it. That's the bass player's problem already, because we're turning our wrists this way or this way when we're playing, and more people are going to have trouble with the fourth and fifth finger particularly than a carpal tunnel situation, because that's the bass player's thing. So that even affects it more, because when you are letting your wrist fall off on the laptop, and of course nobody is at a laptop at a desk, you're on the couch or you're on bed, or you're somewhere where there's nothing ergonomically good that can be said about what you're doing, yet you're doing it, right? And this is all of us, and myself included, okay? So that's something certainly to think about. Another thing too that gives you the bass players fourth and fifth finger tingling numbness issues is every time we sit down on a chair that has arms on it, we tend to sit, and maybe we'll sit like that, and then our arms will find that little groove on the edge because we think it's comfortable. But that presses into this ulnar nerve, which causes these problems. So just pointing out again, things that happen in our quote-unquote everyday lives really contribute to these kind of situations. So Steve, as a player and an educator, you were an educator to me, still are, but 30 years ago. What have you seen over the years, and what do you see most in students that can be altered to contribute to longevity for a bassist?
Well, thank you. And for those of you who don't know, Randy was my student years ago in LA when I taught at Musicians Institute.
Yes.
And he was in my rock bass class. And I got to say, it's such a trip because he used to stand up with his long hair. He introduced me to Megadeth, of all things. and I don't mean the music, I mean the band. And reciting Andrew Dice Clay in front of the class. I mean, to see you go from that to what you're doing, it tells me that anything is possible. But I mean that. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's really true. Is that where we are early in our lives, and you were in a good place, but just to see what you've evolved into, and here I am sitting on a panel, being asked questions I can't answer. This is a perfect turnaround as fair play. I mean, I used to have, I remember distinctly being in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I was playing with Dizzy Gillespie at the time, and this was a quartet with sax, trumpet, bass, and drums, and Diz would come around and comp piano, but all of that to say that I had to solo on every song. And I was playing both basses, and I started to feel this pain right up through here early on. And I told somebody about it, and it was this piano player, and he said, man, you know, I've watched you play before, and I think you ought to breathe more. And that's all he said. And I started really breathing in my solos and everywhere, and just being conscious of my breath until I was unconscious of it again. And that pain went away. And it has never come back. And then I started getting into, my brother's a doctor, of why I think a lot of us, and I'll tie this all in, at Berkeley we have over 300 bass students. And I see tons of injuries, 20 faculty and 340 bass students. But with those kind of numbers, I see a lot of injury because people have to come through the chair to get postpone their tests and to take incompletes in their lessons because they're physically injured. And I see tons of documentation that comes from doctors who have diagnosed them or treating them or whatever. And even some of the diagnosis and treatment are so diametrically opposed to each other. It's like, so I'm just grateful for what you share with people because it comes from real experience. Not a lot of the doctors are musicians and they don't understand. But back to breathing. I always tell the students, take a look at your breathing. I can think of so few woodwind players, trumpet players who have the same kind of injuries. And the only thing I can figure out, because I watch some sax players, they're doing some crazy stuff and the thumbs are coming around, but they have to breathe between every phrase. And my brother explains to me about the oxygen, how quickly oxygen deprivation occurs in the body, because the air that I just inhaled is now going through my bloodstream. It's that fast. So the first thing your body, when it's short of oxygen, it shuts down the blood supply to your extremities to preserve your internal. So once I started learning that, it made sense how that piano player just said, breathe. When you play, take a breath in the phrases, and my pain went away. I'm not saying that's a cure for it, but it was for me. And I've just noticed over the years, not to mention what it does for your playing, of just that breathing and leaving space and being in the moment with what we're doing, rather than, I watch students a lot of times, we get so into it and we're learning this and we tense up. And not only do we tense up, which leads to injury, we forget about breathing. And once I think of breathing as food for my fingers, it changes the way I think, because without food in my fingers, which is the oxygen, I'm going to have trouble. So that's kind of a long way to say that I see these injuries. I don't know if breathing is a cure, and I'm sure you can talk about it, but it certainly is prevention. I do know that.
Yeah, back to the awareness concept we're talking about, which again I think is the most valuable thing anybody can show anybody to help with this topic. Breathing fosters awareness. If you're playing and tensing and you're getting through it and, oh man, I'm going to make it, if you're not breathing, that, again, because of lack of circulation and repetitive use, leads to tension in muscles. That is not awareness, except, wow, this hurts. That's the only awareness that you're getting there, and that is just your body telling you you're not really doing it particularly correctly. So, absolutely on point. All of these things so far. Chichi, so you are definitely, I would say, the most orchestral, consistently player of all, for sure, in this room, or maybe not in this room, but on this panel, certainly. And also, I find fascinating the fact that you started playing relatively late in life. 18, is that correct?
Yeah, nearly 18.
You had another career before that. And the music started then, and that is relatively late for, I would say, a musician of this caliber to start. I'm wondering if that has informed your playing as far as longevity, or as far as how you look at things. And mostly I'm wondering, because I'm going to be 20 next week, and I'm wondering if there's hope. I'm wondering if there's hope for me to start late as well. So please, if you can.
He lied back then, and he's still alive.
Who knows? It's funny how you don't know. You can't know now what you just don't know, and then when 10 years later you look back and think, gosh, if I'd known that then, there's a beauty of hindsight, I think they call it. But when I was 17 and a half, when I had my knee injury that ended my sprinting career, I had no idea what I was going to be doing. Music was a hobby, and I was one of those children that I was into everything possible. And in those days, I'm so old now that, that we lived in the days where we didn't have a car. We weren't driven to and from every single activity in our childhood lives. From the age of 5, when I started school, I walked to school, wherever the school was. We all walked there, and we walked home, we walked to everything. And when I took up the piano at the age of 7, my parents found a little bicycle for me, and we lived about 4 miles outside the city of Canterbury. And the 7-year-old got on this bicycle and cycled into the city of Canterbury. And that would be called child abuse today, wouldn't it? and so I was always given, we were always given the belief in ourselves and the tools that we could overcome anything we needed to do. We knew what we wanted to, if there was a goal at the end of the journey, then we would get ourselves there by hook or by crook. So every day was an adventure, therefore. Music always had a magnetism for me, even though after I'd taken up the recorder and the piano, and they were passionate hobbies, athletics became my absolute focus. I was and at the age of 8 I was spotted and training with a one-to-one with a sprint coach, and so the kind of training that I was doing was like an Olympic gymnast and sprinter from a very, very young age. And being the first of 5 children, you never get one-to-one attention. So I've thought about that now, that it was probably quite appealing for me to get all that one-to-one stuff, because I had 4 hours a week with my coach. And when you're training over something so intense as the 100 meters, every single milli movement that you make in every single millisecond plays a role in getting you to the end of that 100 meters. And within less than 10 years, I had the fastest start in Great Britain and was preparing for the Montreal Olympics. And my knee injury happened in my last year at school, between Munich and Montreal. And so I already had a set of skills that prepared me. I could never go, I was so well trained. I never pulled a muscle, for example, in training or competition. And sprinters often, you see them pulling up with a hamstring or something. Never happened with me. I had the most extraordinary. He was a doctor of science, my sprint coach, and he was one of the main sprint coaches at Canterbury Athletic Club. And I remember when I got to about the age of 12, I was desperate to start using starting blocks, like I saw these big sprinters using these starting blocks. He wouldn't let me near them because he said that will, because he spent so much time on my start, and he perfected every single angle of my arm and my, the stride out of the blocks and things like that. I trained on the blocks for at least a year before I was allowed to use them in competition, because it was part of my tools to win the race. And I was so well trained on those that, and it's in my nature to respond very well to physical instruction. So I became a very good technician in athletics. And I think all of that kind of preparation, the mental preparation, dealing with adrenaline and all of those things, because adrenaline can screw you up as well. And when you go to the start line, the same thing used to happen to me every single time. When you're under starters' orders and they say, "Take your marks," those 3 words. I would go into this incredibly quiet place where it was almost like there was a sort of one of those kind of big bubbles that you blow out of those bubble machines would seem to go around my head, and I every other sound just vanished into obscurity. I didn't hear anything else, and I guess that was part of my adrenaline. All I could hear, my ears were sharply focused on just the voice of the starter, who would be standing on that side of me. And I guess that's where the bass is. But that was all I could hear. And then once the gun was off and I was 3/4 of the way down the 100 meters, sound started to creep back in. And I think that was my adrenaline. And as a sprinter, when you go to that start line, even if you've got Usain Bolt standing next to you or crouching, in the blocks next to you, you have to believe that you're going to get to the end before he does. Because no sprinter can go to the start thinking, "Oh my God, his time is like 1.5 seconds faster than mine." And so then you start tensing. You've got to let all of that go. And because you don't know condition they're in right now, and anything can happen, and it's not a given. I mean, so when the gun goes off, I usually the first thought that used to go through my mind when the gun went off was, where is everybody? Because I had such a fast start, and then I would hear them closing in on me at the end. That was the worst bit. If it was Sonia Lanneman, then she would get me at the end. But so, and often people say to me, "How did you go from being a 100-meter sprinter to a double bass player?" And actually. Because I'm 5'0", so I was told all of these things about, you're so short. It's the first thing that most people say to me when they first meet me.
I've heard it all my life.
Yeah. and so you just find a way. And when you've grown up as a child, that we didn't have money as a resource, we just had to find our own way to do what we needed to do. And it usually didn't involve money, although I did get my first job at the age of 9. I was the church organist, and I earned £1 per semester. I thought I'd made it, and but it was the kind of preparation that, I because I'd already played the piano and things like that were good. I suddenly thought, God, this is so easy. I've only got to read one line at a time, and immediately. Being thrown into the being thrown into the school orchestra. It was the day I came out of my 2 weeks in hospital having my knee operated on. I had just won the school annual music competition, which I only went in for that competition once in my life, because I always thought it was a bit weird to have a competition with all instruments against each other. I used to think it's like the 100 meters versus the pole vault. How do you judge that, And so I didn't understand that concept. And anyway, I spent more time training as a sprinter. And so during the month that I had to wait before going to have my operation, I did a bit more practice on the piano because I couldn't do my sprint training. And so I thought, I'll have a go at this competition, and I won it, playing Chopin. And returned to school, and the head of music fell into step with me. I was doing A-level music, which is the final exams before university. And he said, look, whole school's devastated. Headmistress and I, we think that you've got what it takes to have a career in music. I had no idea what he was talking about. And that was when he led me to this room and showed me these huge things. And I said, but look at the size of me and look at the size of that. And he said, well, when have you ever been put off by a challenge? And he said, and by the way, the prize you won pays for the lessons until you leave the school. The prize I won for the competition paid for. So and I think I just immediately applied all of the principles of my athletics training. And the strings were my tracks in a way, and precision timing is everything as a sprinter, as an athlete, and your breathing, all of that goes together with it, and you do it I was doing it without realizing, and I was able to transfer those skills.
Wow.
Straight away.
Yeah, again, another way of looking at all of this, awareness, etc. A lot of corollaries between athletic training and musician training. Some of them, I think, ring true. This is an athletic endeavor somewhat. You do have to do repetitive motions over and over. You do have to do some kind of training to maintain your stamina and be able to do these things. I think with athletics, if somebody takes it too far, then we're talking about training too much, perhaps. But that's a different place. Love the corollaries, and it makes perfect sense now how you could transition seamlessly from one to the next without even knowing it. Someone saying to you, "You're ready, and you know what's up, and this would be great for you." I think that's wonderful, and all of these approaches. We haven't even talked about the bass yet, and we've got great things to think about when we're just walking down the street and just conducting ourselves in our everyday lives, which is going to inform our playing lives and vice versa. So excellent stuff, all of you. Thanks a lot. I think we'll open it up now. Jason has been taking some questions from the internet and.
Yeah, and I think we got all these people here, but there are questions out here.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably get a lot of these questions from folks that submitted them online. They'll probably get answered anyway, and we can follow up at the end with anything we haven't covered. So, any questions, topics you'd like? Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested about the feet position on your setting.
Yeah, if this was my stool, pardon my back, you know, you have to get a low standing stool so you can have your feet planted, you see. I was very averse to that. I don't know why. For years, I used to sit like this, you know, real comfortable. It wasn't up that high, but it just felt good to me. I don't know why. I'm lefty. I don't know why, but I like the right foot planted for some reason, but it really was not good for my lower back. Then I started talking to people. You know, I know you know Tom Martin too, right? He helped me too. After my career had done some things, I went back. I wanted to study again, and I wanted to really, because I felt like I wanted more sound, but I knew, because I was trained well when I was younger, that pressing is not the answer. I wanted to maximize the arm weight and use it well. And I went to Tom Martin and also Johnny Schaefer and different people, and they helped me. But they also showed me, Tom was good because I was learning. I did some concertos and stuff. There was a composer who wrote me a concerto, and I noticed I was practicing hours and hours on these thumb position. I was pretty well acquainted with thumb position. I've been playing for years that way, up using the whole bass. But I wasn't used to just spending 4 hours practicing passages up there, and I didn't want to lean over the bass. And Tom said, well, let the bass come to you. Keep your feet planted and let the bass come to you. That worked great for that. However, I had to take breaks because sometimes the neck kind of hangs in here a little bit. And then I started getting trouble with that. And so then I started sitting when I play real heavy, you know, boat passages where I have to use thumb position. It helped me a lot. But now I had this planting thing. I use both. Tonight I'll probably sit some, I'll stand some because I like to play time and jazz standing up. But when I play with the bow, I like the whole bass at my disposal. I don't want to have to reach over. I'm not terribly tall either. I'm wearing boots right now. So, you know, and every time anybody ever came to see me in a concert, they go, wow, I thought you were so much taller. Sorry to disappoint you. 5'8", you know. So, but yeah, I have them planted, and I think it's an excellent thing to do. And I noticed that a lot more teachers over the years, you know, like I say, I've been at this a long time. Over the decades, I think teachers got more focused on getting people to kind of right themselves physically, because the bass, if you watched Chi-Chi last night, she was preparing. Like when she's ready to come in, her body is flowing in that direction. It's not like out of nowhere startling the body. And that's the way you have to. I always joke about it. I say, playing the double bass is like football. If you don't have physical conditioning and you're not really, it's incredible how she just ran that whole thing down about discipline and physical conditioning. Because I'm always been aware that what we're doing is physical, and when you transfer weight well, you don't injure yourself. But same as in sports, if you're not using your weight right, you get hurt.
Can I just add one little thing to that? And what you said about the adrenaline, I think that's something that we overlook, how important that is, because I have so many students and people, they're performance majors, and they'll talk about how nervous they are before they go on stage. And it's another thing that having a brother who's a doctor and being kind of inquisitive about this, I've learned some things about adrenaline and about that fight or flight mentality. And I've got chills right now the way you explain that. Like when I took that breath, I went there for a second just to feel what that is. But here's the deal. Have you seen on TV or wherever on YouTube where the smallest person does an amazing thing, lifts a car off a child? Everybody's seen these superhuman feats that the body can do. It's adrenaline. The same thing that freezes you, a deer in the middle of the road, or freezes us and makes us nervous, is also the same chemical that can make us superhuman. It's the same chemical. It's how we learn to channel it. And I've noticed in music and the description you gave in athletics, like right when you hear you're trained, right when you hear that on your mark, basically, everything goes quiet. And that's the kind of adrenaline focus. You weren't nervous, right? Everything just, it's the zone. It's what musicians and athletes talk about, the zone. You fall into that magical place where you become superhuman in a way. So I think that when we take a look at nervousness, and I do some meditation, I do some other things to help me channel the anxiety and the adrenaline into focus. And it's the same chemical, it's just how we direct it. One of the best, we used to do a thing, Victor Wooten and I, this Bass at the Beach, and one of our best and most informative guests, we got tons of emails about how much they got from him, was Jim Courier. And I don't know if you know Jim, but he was world #1 tennis player, won the French Open and Australian Open. He came and talked to us about his life as an athlete. And one guy, he wrote in, he goes, after hearing Jim, I went home and I sold my TV. Because the level of discipline and the level of focus that it takes to be a professional athlete, to be a top-level athlete, if you can apply that to music, I mean, we think we work hard and we practice hard until you've actually done it or talked to somebody who's really gotten in there. So there's a lot to be learned by, I call this cross-training, literally taking a pun from athletics, but there's so much that can inform us that has nothing to do with the bass, has really and often has nothing to do with music, but there's so much to be learned from other areas of our existence that can inform our music and make it better. And by the way, since everybody's mentioned Short, one of the best letters we ever got, Bass Player Magazine sent it to us, it was before emails, was this kid wrote in, he goes, I can't believe it. I went to a Bass Extremes thing and there was Victor Wooten and there was Steve Bailey and there was this long ellipsis, and he says, gosh, these guys are short. I still have that handwritten letter from this young kid. He just couldn't believe that we weren't superhuman, because you listen to the records and you think, and all of a sudden he walks up to us and he's looking down at us. So it's okay. We're in good company.
Well, and the thing about discipline, I just want to add one more thing. I went through this period about 25 years ago when I started to, I want to do recitals and I want to start getting out there because I write music that crosses over between classical music, and I was trained. So, and man, at first, the adrenaline, when I first did my first little recitals, just piano and bass, it felt like I was going back to being a kid again. All of a sudden, like I was getting really nervous. I was like, what's going on with this? I had to go through a process emotionally and spiritually and mentally to relax myself again and realize, you know what? Why? I was shocked because I'd been performing and doing all this stuff. But just that thing of having to work on some new music and really being naked like that in front of, and it was really important. And I went through a lot of stuff. I did some concerto playing. Man, talk about mental. And I found, for me, everybody's different, but the discipline about getting ready, preparation was the thing that got rid of all that. If I was really prepared and I really busted my tail for months and months and months, and then when I got up there in front, because it's weird also because I'm used to playing with other people, either chamber music or in a band in a rhythm section. Now I'm out there all alone, and it's like, wow. And then I had to go through a whole new process and it's all about that discipline that these folks are talking about. It's like football. It's like you better be in condition.
But at the same time, this morning, and I'll play devil's advocate. Those of you who were at our presentation this morning, there was no preparation, unless you look at it like we do. Our whole life has been a preparation for that moment, and it's that simple. But that becomes mental again. Like we could have come in and go, man, what do you want to do? I don't know. What if they ask this? We don't even talk anymore. We just start playing music. We didn't even agree on music to play, or obviously keys or anything. But it's that preparation, that life preparation, that allows us to be able to do that. So at the same time, while it looks like there's no preparation and we just fly in and do these cool things, it's a whole life of mental conditioning and preparation to do that.
And to tie all this again together to awareness very quickly, the breathing allows you to manage and lessen that tension. That's the awareness that most of us don't get. To
Right.
manage that adrenaline, to use it for good, which it is, when you need to lift that car, when you need to give it your all. But then, man, you gotta leave it behind, because this isn't doing anybody any good, walking around like that all the time. And to John's point and to your question about the balance, to think that we're always going to balance perfectly, it ain't gonna happen, okay? What the awareness makes you do is, okay, maybe this song, I'm gonna lean a little to this side, or, hey, I am leaning a little to this side, maybe I'll give it a little bit more on this side, and keep that dynamic motion moving. And then when you are used to doing these things, you don't even have to think about it. It's like, I'm not thinking about how I'm walking or how I'm breathing, because I've been doing that my whole life. That's been my preparation. When I wanted to learn how to breathe again deeply, I had a gig where, when I was putting myself through chiropractic school, I had a job where I had to wear a polyester suit and lean and do a 12-hour shift. This was like the only real job I ever had, by the way. I'm proud to say.
It sounds
But
really unreal to me.
I had to lean on a counter.
Polyester
So what I did was, so I wouldn't breathe through my chest, so I breathed through my abdomen. I leaned on the counter for hours, and I just pushed myself away using my abdominal muscles. And it not only taught me to breathe properly, but also to adopt the Adonis-like body you see before you.
Hey, but breathing is one of the fundamental tenets of almost every kind of meditation.
You bet.
And what I didn't realize was that piano player who told me at that time, just breathe more. I was actually getting who needed meditation at 22, but I did need that information.
Yeah. Another question?
We have a sea of questions.
You did, Jason?
Jeff.
Do you have a regimen of stretching either before you play or after you play? And I know it could depend on the situation that where you're playing, but anything like that.
It depends how much time I've got.
Right.
Yeah, but I think when you've been doing something for such a long time, I'm always in a certain amount of shape all the time. But I will just, like last night, for example, I had about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just going up and down and repeating a few passages. And sometimes I do, single hand clapping and just to warm things up a little bit. But, and quite often as a double bass player, most, especially playing in orchestra, most of the other instruments have their instruments backstage. Ours are usually left on the stage, and we come on relatively cold. So I will do, put my hand against a wall and do things like that kind of stuff before going on. We've been on and we've warmed up and tuned up, left the basses on stage, but everyone else is continuously warming up backstage. So we don't have that, and so you do have to be careful. The thing about the sitting, it depends what shoe. I mean, last night I had stilettos on, so I was able to have both.
Oh, we didn't notice.
So I was able to have both my feet on the ground, but normally I can't because I need the left foot up just to hold the bass. Otherwise, it just slides away.
Yeah.
It just slides away. And so physically, I can't really. I need my. So I've started using one of those yoga pads, and I came across that when I was judging the Sphinx competition, where I saw the bass. In fact, Aaron Olgan, who played a recital the other day, he was in that competition, and all the bass players had these pads. And I realised, and when I asked why don't you just put your foot on the stool rung, they said because you're kind of twisting that leg back into your pelvis, and it's better to have it more. Your pelvis is more open if your foot can be slightly out.
Yeah.
Spot on.
So that was it.
And you don't need fancy stuff. You got a couple bricks laying around, that'll do it.
But isn't it funny how we want to do the other one though?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it more comfortable for you when you had your leg up this way?
Yeah.
Kind of like it just feels good,
Yeah,
but
well,
then
no,
your body
it's
says
because-
no.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do it the other way around because I need the strings facing this way. I guess it helps to move the. And there was a time, I can't remember when I saw you in Chicago, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I was leading up to a shoulder surgery.
Right.
I I started to get a lot of pain every single time I raised my right arm. So I thought, maybe I'm not practicing enough. I practice a bit more. The more I practice, the more pain, searing pain into my shoulder. I didn't know what was going on. Then my physio, he did an ultrasound, and he said there's so much white stuff that he could see in there that he said there's a lot of inflammation in there. We need to properly see what's going on. He said you can see there's the top shoulder surgeon in the country, and he's so busy you won't get to see him. If you can get down to Manchester Square in the next 20 minutes, he could see you. So I did another sort of 11-second sprint from Baker Street.
I bet it got quiet
I went-
then. Surgery.
I got from Baker Street down to the surgery, and he said, right, well, I'm just going to put you straight into the MRI. And he said, goodness me, you've got 3 tendons about to snap.
Wow.
And I said, what's going on? And the biceps tendon was in shreds. There's rotator cuff, and the subscap.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, he said, this needs surgery tomorrow. I said, but I'm flying to America tomorrow. I was doing a big bass recital in Portland. And so I had to, he said, if you snap it, then I'll have to cut you open. Right now I can do keyhole, as it is now. And I said, I promise I won't snap it. He said, well, how are you going to? Well, I'll make myself stand up, because when you stand up, you can turn the bass in towards the bow a bit more. Yeah. So I had to just learn to do that. And then he said, we'll know exactly why this is going on when I go in there, because he couldn't see what was causing it. And so, and then, of course, the morning after the operation, when he came round to see me, he said, I know exactly what caused all of this. He said, you were born with a little bit, tiny bit of it, like a bone spur, in my right shoulder. So all those millions of bow strokes, you've been sawing your way through your own tendons.
Yeah. And bone grows.
He just took it away, and I got 4 little holes around there. It's absolutely no pain.
Did you wait, or did you go right the next day and have it? Or you went to America?
I said, I'm going to, I was about to, my
Yeah.
flight, I played for the next couple of months, actually.
Woo!
But standing up. I just made myself play standing up. And so when I had to go really high, I just took a step backwards and let the bass lie back against
But
me.
thank God he couldn't tell you that before you went on tour, because every time you did a stroke, you would think, I'm just sawing my way through.
Because we didn't know.
And now you have sound holes in your show.
So he just fixed it. He's just got. You might. All of us are born with the odd bits and pieces that we might not know about.
Wow.
And it's only because of what I do with my right arm that it did what it did.
Right.
And bone grows throughout your life, so it responds to imposed demand. So you keep doing this, the body says, hey, we need extra bone there to help support what's happening. Here's some more bone. Body's really
Just what
awesome,
we do.
except when it does that.
Yeah.
Wow. Other questions? Yes. Right here. Yep.
Sure. So I got a question. So a recent study came out in Canada that showed 50% of music students in universities have or had a repetitive stress injury, and for orchestral players in Canada, it was 76 had or has or currently working through repetitive stress injury. And I really don't understand why music schools, like they demand you practice like 4 hours a day, like that's like the minimum.
Yeah.
And then I think my music school brought in the 4 years I was there, brought in someone to do Alexander technique for an hour. Like that's all they did. So I've been trying to like convince schools to have like physiotherapists on like campus in Canada to avoid that. I know my one teacher who has the best gig in Canada had to take a year off because of and stuff. So how can I convince the faculties to actually do something about it better?
I'll say this, at Berkeley we do have therapists, physical therapists, but so few people take advantage of it. And it comes back to this, it comes back to awareness. And I think, I don't want to hurt anybody, but I will. It falls back on faculty, I think, in that we need, as faculty, to be more aware of these principles so that we can recognize what's going on earlier. We don't have to diagnose, we don't have to cure anything per se, but there are propensities for certain it's in your DNA. Some people are going to be more susceptible to some kind of injury. And I think, and I've got one of our teachers, Susan Hagen, who you may have seen with the Boston Symphony, and she was the first classical person hired there. I saw a huge need in the students of that foundational training that we were talking about. And John and I hatched this plan and sold it to the provost, and the next thing you know, we hired somebody who can't walk a blues. And
And we're thrilled about it
Oh,
because she's a great musician. You know?
she's the most in-demand teacher we have. But what comes with that is her awareness. And I think classical musicians may be, it sounds like not quite aware enough, but more aware of these type of injuries and stresses than maybe, you know, other styles. But it really comes down to awareness. There's so much. If I were the chair of that music department, I would do what I do at my department, is bring these people in to talk in faculty meetings to help raise awareness about that. And that transcends physical things, and also being able to pick up on mental, I'll just say, challenges that people have, and it all revolves around, a lot of it revolves around performance and the anxieties and all of these other things that contribute to or hurt our wellness.
We also, at Berkeley, we've had things where a student, because it's a critical time in people's lives, somebody's like 19 years old, right? And they're going through all these things. Sometimes we've been able to effectively arrange an intervention. We talk to the parents, and then we were able to help a kid from really going off the deep end because somebody saw early on and paid attention and cared.
Right.
And said, you know, something's not right with Joey or whatever. That's a mythical name. Maybe we should pay attention and just see and ask him some questions, and then have him go speak. We have counselors.
Yeah.
But then it got to the point where the counselor saying, yeah, we really need to contact Joey's parents. And
So
it helped.
you literally only have 1 hour with Alexander technique or something like that.
Yeah, they just said that it's not in the budget to bring in someone to.
But see, that gets back to management, and it's awareness. If somebody could just emphasize, if they were sitting here, they might realize the importance of wellness. And I'll every college is different in how they approach that, and it's usually driven from the bottom up and then initiated from the top down. Is okay. We need to take this seriously. You know, we've now got Kenny Werner on the faculty, a guy who wrote Effortless Mastery, which has crossed all kinds of bounds. But you would think he'd be part of he's part of the wellness program.
To cover the question of why don't they have it, it's strictly economics and lack of knowledge, as you touched upon. It's lack of knowledge from the teachers because their teachers had a lack of knowledge too. And that's not a slam, just the way it is, okay? And number two, in the States anyway, there is now a mandate that you have to have a certain amount of physical education regarding your instrument, and that's part of the rules. I think it's NRCME or something. There's a governing body of education for colleges that says there has to be X amount, and that's your Alexander lesson, quite frankly. Okay, that's really I'd go do for Mark Dresser. I go down to UCSD and do like an hour of these every year or two. One class, and there's your session. Now Mark goes out of his way to do a whole course with different practitioners and does a beautiful job, but that's definitely the exception rather than the rule. So that's why you got that amount. Something that I'm doing is putting together an educational component for all education that can go into any level, and that will cover all instruments and the subjects we're talking about, and that will be available before the end of the year. So if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to sell your university one of these systems. Absolutely. But this will cover it, and this is what is needed, and it's also the law in the U.S. according to the governing body.
Several questions. Chris? got time for a few more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question about left-hand tension. So with bassists, you know, they open some mandel, and there's this famous picture of him standing with his bass way over his head and his hands spread way out, and how you approach students and getting them to play with a more relaxed hand, but you know, still, I guess, honoring the tradition of bass pedagogy.
When I went back many years ago now to really go back and to really dig a little deeper.
This was after you're already John Patitucci. I mean, you're meaning
Well-
seriously, and I know this story because he already had this amazing career and was playing at the highest level, but he sought to dig deeper. So I just want to set the stage.
So I went to study with Johnny because at Tom's request, I said, Tom, I really want to take my bow arm, I want to take it to another place. I'm not happy. He said, he didn't even hesitate. I said, who should I'm moving back to New York, where I'm from. Who should I see? He goes, Johnny Schaefer. Okay, so I go to this guy. He was very crusty, funny guy. But I thought we were just going to work primarily on this. And I'm left-handed. That's my good hand. In the first lesson, I go in, I play Bottesini for him. He goes, yeah, you're a talented kid. He's got a cigar. He goes, but your left hand's horrible. And I'm like, oh, no.
Don't you know who I am?
No, I don't care about that. So he said, but, you know, I don't want to change everything. So, you know, tell me. And I said, no. You can change anything you want. I want to hear what you have to say. And, you know, because I have been playing so much jazz and doing so much stuff where it's so intense sometimes, you don't even realize the tension you're carrying in your body. When you're on the 5th chorus of the tenor solo and he's going way up there and the drummer's bashing and you're digging in. What I was doing, I started pressing too much with my thumb in the back of my neck. I was pressing. I didn't even realize I was doing it. My hands, you know, my hand position was pretty good, but I was pressing. He said, you don't have to show me you're strong. I know you're strong, young man. So he did this thing where it was really cool. He said, I want you to hold the bass neck like this without your thumb on the neck. And he pulls from the other side. And he said, just use your body weight and relax. And he couldn't pull it out of my hand. And then I realized, wait a minute. I'm putting so much intensity and energy with my thumb in the back of the neck. It's terrible. And it'll wear you out after a while. And that's why people have problems, technical problems, and they have... Or they don't have a good angle. Like some people will say, you know, that picture is kind of crazy because he's way up there. It's terrible. I realize it's easy to get into bad habits. You know, too much of this is no good either. That's too high. It has to be relaxed enough to where that line. And he used to say, shift. You shift with your arm. Don't change your hand position when you shift. They're just little calipers. When you go up the neck, they get a little smaller. But that helped me a lot. I took all the tension out of my left hand. I was able to shift way better because he had me doing shifting forever.
I think a lot of it, I'm a right-handed player rather than left-handed player. And I think in the 18th century, we were all right-handed players. And, you know, a lot of our virtuosity was in the right hand with all the string crossing. And if you look at those concerti
Right.
with Van Housen, Dittersdorfs, and with the correct tuning, it's all about crossing the strings at great velocity and etc. And the left-hand technique was, I think it was Rodney Slatford that he told me what the word was. He said it was called the grip technique, where all that passage work, you could do it in just one position,
Right.
covering all 4 strings. And that's how I recorded my three 18th century concerti with the Viennese tuning. And it was everything was in the right hand. And we've become, as we've gone into the 20th century, we've become very left-handed players with adding in vibrato and all of these things, and people grip and they vibrate. And when things go wrong, everyone thinks it's the left hand. And I usually find that there are times when you've got to try not to let your right hand know what your left hand's trying to do, and vice versa. But they do reflect each other. And I think, you know, obviously there's the bass. The bow sits on the string. You don't have to grip the bow like that because the bass is holding it up anyway, and the thumb is just helping to guide it, just like back here.
Yeah.
We're not gripping it like that.
Yeah.
And I think the two are quite matching. And I mean, I literally do everything from the right hand.
Yeah.
The other way around.
Before we take a last question, I'd like to give our esteemed guests the opportunity to plug something they may be working on so we can support them. I know, Steve, you're working on an album of duets right now.
Yeah, it's an album. This
coming out midsummer. Few of the tracks I've already released, I've got some cards, but it's an album of duets. It's just me with one other person, and it ranges from Ron Carter to Victor Wooten to Willie Nelson and Ian Anderson, all kinds of different kinds of duets. So look for that out there.
It's great. I've
really
heard
soon.
a lot of it already.
Yeah. John would have been on it, but his residencies at Berkeley didn't coordinate with me being on sabbatical. We've got to fix that.
It's good that you had sabbatical. Though. You need sabbatical.
Chichi, would you like to talk about your passions?
Yeah, well, the thing that I'm doing that's taking up most of my time now is the Chineke Foundation, which I guess 4.5 years ago the British government the culture minister was calling me in to talk about why they only saw me regularly on the international concert platform, and what he meant was black person on the international concert platform in classical music. And of course I always knew that was the case in the orchestras that I played with, and when I only ever came across people of ethnicity who, when it was usually just a solo opera singer or something like that, very rarely a colleague within the orchestra. And it wasn't preoccupying my mind. I knew it was going on, but I knew it was the case, but I never had the conversation about why with any colleagues. I'd never discussed it. And possibly because I didn't know what people thought, and I didn't want to come across as being defensive or paranoid. So for me, it was easier not to have the conversation. But now I talk of little else now because it's so clear. I'll talk about lots of things, but so the South Bank, and when I decided what I was going to do, I called every musical institution in the country, and they all said, "We're getting behind you." And less than a year later, 62 of us walked onto the stage at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and I'd found, against what I'd been told, that people of colour didn't exist or weren't interested in classical music. It's not your sort of music, is it? So I thought this was really strange, and I was fascinated by how many people seemed to know the reasons. And of course, it's not the case, and it's also not true. The more I searched for players, the more I found the well of talent runs deep. And I started not just one orchestra, the professional orchestra, but a junior orchestra as well. Wow. And you would have seen, if any of you watched The Royal Wedding, the cellist, and he was part of the junior orchestra and the senior orchestra. And right from the start, we started 3.5 years ago. And what's happened in the last 3.5 years has been extraordinary. We're actually doing a US tour next year in spring, and we're going to Canada. The last concert's in Ottawa. Anyway, we've got a lot of fundraising to do in order to make that tour happen. But any support for Chineke, be it by CDs or concerts or anything, would be greatly welcomed.
That's cool.
John?
I think it's available here somewhere. I have a new CD called Soul of the Bass. It's a primarily solo record, but there's some duets. There's also a cello and bass octet with my wife and I on it that I wrote for us to play. And my daughters sing on a track as well. So the family got involved. Nate Smith, the drummer, is on a couple tracks. But then most of the record is just me by my lonesome.
It's beautiful. I was listening to it, and you're going to play some music off that tonight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Awesome.
and but it's mostly double bass, but there's some electric bass too. There's a Bach Allemande that I did in the style of sort of Jordi Savall, who was one of my heroes, and I took his idea because I'm sure Chichi's way more aware of it than I am even, but I love the fact that I've studied Baroque music a lot in my life, and I love the fact that they improvised so much, and the ornaments, can change on the repeat of the A section. And I think that's beautiful. So I tried to reflect, instead of going to the cellist versions like what we generally do. I've been listening to Jordi Savall all my life. He's amazing. So anyway, my little experiment is based on the way he plays, but transported to the 6-string bass.
Okay, I think we're done. I want to thank Jason for recording this for posterity. Jason, of course, Contrabass Conversations, where you'll be able to get this podcast and a wealth of other ones. Certainly, what you're on, like number 600 now or something? Okay. Much love and respect to my esteemed guests. Thank you for coming today. Really, truly. Steve Bailey.